This video will look at the two strategies for subtraction which are taught in Year 3, the SMILE method and column subtraction. Let's look at this equation, 369 subtract 124. Before we can solve this equation, we must decide which strategy is the most efficient. If the equation does not require regrouping, the SMILE method is most efficient, whereas if the equation does require regrouping, column subtraction is the most efficient. First, let's look at the hundreds. 3 hundreds subtract 100 is equal to 2 hundreds. We can do this without regrouping. Next, let's look at the tens. 6 tens subtract 2 tens is equal to 40. We can do this without regrouping. Finally, let's look at the ones. 9 subtract 4 is equal to 5, which we can do without regrouping. Therefore, no regrouping is necessary and we can use the SMILE method. First, we subtract the hundreds. We know 300 subtract 100 is 200, so we put a 2 in the hundreds place. Now, let's look at the tens. We know 60 subtract 20 is 40, so we put a 4 in the tens place. Finally, let's look at the ones. We know 9 subtract 4 is equal to 5, so we put a 5 in the ones place. Therefore, we know that 369 subtract 124 is equal to 245. Now, let's look at a new equation. 364 subtracts 128. First, we must decide which strategy to use. 300 subtract 100 is equal to 200, which we can calculate without regrouping. 60 subtract 20 is equal to 40, which we can calculate without regrouping. The answer to 4 subtract 8 is less than 0, so we need to regroup. Therefore, we use column subtraction. We set up column subtraction like column addition, neatly in columns of hundreds, tens and ones. Use the squares in your book to help you do this. We then put our two numbers underneath our column headings, one on top of the other. Then we put in our subtraction symbol and our equals lines. When we are doing column subtraction, we always start with the ones. We cannot calculate 4 subtract 8, so we need to regroup a 10 from the tens place. We cross out the 6 tens and replace it with 5 tens. We then put this 10 into the ones place, so now, instead of 4, we have 14, because 4 plus 10 is equal to 14. Now, we calculate 14 subtract 8, which is equal to 6. Therefore, we put a 6 in the ones place. Then, we calculate 5 tens subtract 2 tens, which is equal to 3 tens. So we put 3 tens in the tens place. Finally, 300 subtract 100 is 200, so we put a 2 in the hundreds place. Therefore, 364 subtract 128 is equal to 236. In our next example, 438 subtract 164, we must regroup in the tens place, so we must use column subtraction. We will set this out in columns as we did before. Now we must look at the ones. 8 subtract 4 is equal to 4, so we put a 4 in the ones place. Now we must look at the tens. 3 tens subtract 6 tens is less than 0, so we must regroup 100 from the hundreds place. We cross out the 4 hundreds and instead write 3 hundreds. We then add our new 100 in the tens place. We now have 13 tens instead of 3 tens. Next, we subtract in the tens place. 13 tens subtract 6 tens is 7 tens, so we put a 7 in the tens place. Then we subtract the hundreds. 3 hundreds subtract 100 is 200, so we put a 2 in the hundreds place. Therefore, 438 subtract 164 is equal to 274. These two strategies are the new ones taught in Year 3. However, children are also expected to use strategies they have learnt in Key Stage 1, such as counting on or back in tens and ones, or the Make 10 strategy, if these are more efficient.